Kyle Larson has signed a long-term contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports through 2031, and many drivers' futures are currently uncertain for the 2027 NASCAR Cup season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR Motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just some those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just some of them. First paint scheme we're taking a look at is Blaine Perkins' 2026 Warner scheme that we'll see in many O'Reilly Auto Parts races in 2026. Scheme looks very similar to one he had in 2025. I think it looks alright in my opinion. There's some good colors on the car, but it's not the best looking scheme I've seen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Harrison Burton's 2026 Airbox scheme that we'll see next weekend at Atlanta and a couple of races throughout the 2026 year. Kind of looks similar to the car he had with AM Racing. I was always a big fan of the Airbox car. I think this one actually does look okay. I do like the look of it. I think there's some good look to this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2026 Palo Casino scheme that we'll see in the California races in 2026, including at San Diego. It kind of looks similar to the one that Chris Buescher had last year in 2025 and 2024 as well. Looks similar to other schemes we've seen from other teams in the past. Good to see Palo Casino also joining Tyler Reddick in 2026. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Taylor Gray's 2026 Operation 3000 scheme that we'll see in many O'Reilly Auto Parts races throughout the 2026, as it will be the primary. It's different than the other Operation look. I like the Operation 3000 look from last year a lot more than this one. I do like they went for a more simplistic look with this car, but I think this one certainly could be better. It's alright though. I do like the look of this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jordan Anderson's 2026 Easy Care scheme that we'll see this weekend in the O'Reilly Auto Parts race at Daytona. Car actually looks nice in my opinion. Pretty excited to see Easy Care back in the sports sponsoring once again. It's good to see new sponsorship and former sponsorship working in the sport. Looking forward to see this car out on the racetrack at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clements' 2026 All-South Electric scheme that we'll see this weekend in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Daytona. They're bringing a new look in a sense, but it's very similar to some of the All-South Electric schemes we've seen in the past. I think this one actually does look alright though. I think that Jeremy Clements' team did a pretty good job on the scheme. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sheldon Creed's 2026 Ollie's Bargain Outlet scheme that we'll see this weekend in the O'Reilly Auto Parts race at Daytona and many other races throughout the 2026 year. I think it's great to see Ollie's Bargain Outlet once again sponsoring. I actually like the look of this car. I think it's one of the better Ollie's Bargains cars we've seen in the past especially. And I think the Haas Factory team actually knocked this one out of the park. The colors are great. They look really, really solid. Looking forward to on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Norm Benning's 2026 Daytona scheme that we'll see in the Truck Series opener hopefully tomorrow night. They haven't really seen a full-scale look of the truck, but I know they got the gray biffle iconic look, which I think is phenomenal to see that gray biffle look that the truck is going to have. I think that does look nice to see that many teams are doing gray biffle tributes. I think the truck, from what I can see, looks pretty simple, but it does look pretty clean. Excited to see this truck on the track. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona for the Truck Series opener. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Pocono Cup race, as they have a title sponsor for the event. The title sponsor is once again going to be called the Great American Getaway 400. The Great American Getaway 400 has been the main sponsor for the Pocono Cup Series race for many, many years up to this point. It was a title sponsor last year in 2025. Also, same thing in 24 and I believe in 2023. And that partnership continues into 2026. Of course, is in partnership with Visit PA, Visit Pennsylvania. Part of the tourism companies will be working with this event. Interesting title sponsorship once again. It's not surprising they're going that direction on that. Pretty good to see Great American Getaway will be the title sponsor for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono. Really good stuff for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Franzia. As there was reported by Adam Stern a couple days ago, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, that Franzia has signed with NASCAR Holdings to make Fuel, one of their energy drink companies or vodka or beverage companies, as official sponsor of the vodka side of things for NASCAR or wine companies going into 2026. This is a really big deal. Franze is a little bit of a bigger company. They've got some big things that are associated with NASCAR in the past, I'm pretty sure. So I think having a wine company come in and work with the sport, I do think that's exciting, and I think that's absolutely a really, really huge deal. And I love seeing companies like this come into the sport because there could be a lot of good things that can come from this when you have a partnership like this. So really exciting stuff, and good to see if Franzia and the Fuel branding will be working with NASCAR going into 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Mack Trucks. As it was announced on Tuesday afternoon going into the evening that Mack Trucks has officially announced a multi-year extension as the official hauler of NASCAR starting in 2026. This partnership is expected to last for many, many years. It seems like the rumors that this partnership is probably going to last for like 2029 or 2030 at this point. So probably going to go almost in the media deal or something like that. Mack Truck's been around for many, many years working as the official haulers. It's been around for quite some time. So good to see this partnership will continue once again in 2026. I like seeing partnerships continue that started from the prior years, and I think it's exciting to see that once again, they're back in the sport and they'll once again be working with NASCAR in the 2026 year and continuing that partnership as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kroger. As there was a report by Adam Stern on Tuesday late evening that they have officially confirmed some of their NASCAR partners they are going to have for 2026. Some of them they're going to have Celsius, Coke, Nerds, Schwann's, a former sponsor for the BAM racing team many, many years ago, Kraft, Farm Rich, and many other big companies associated with the brand going into 2026. All these sponsors, of course, are associated with the Kroger brand. They've been at Kroger for many, many years. You can go buy them at Kroger from Ohio, or basically if you're kind of know what a Kroger, if you've been to Kroger, you've probably seen many of these brands before. I think it's really good they're going to continue to work with the sport. I'm very interested to see how the Celsius car is going to look that Ryan Preece has. I think Ryan Preece is associated with Celsius. Of course, they also announced recently they're going to be working with Corey Heim in 2026. But I'm glad to see we know some of the sponsors that they'll be working and the partners they're going to have. Obviously, Preece in a contract year. We'll talk about that in just a little bit as well. Nonetheless, I think it's big, and I think it's good to see we know some of the partners we're going to see for the Kroger brand in 2026 because the more partners they can have being around the sport, the better I think it's going to be, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jose Cuervo. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Jose Cuervo has become the official tequila sponsor in NASCAR starting in 2026. This is a massive, massive partnership when it comes to tequila and when it comes to NASCAR. Jose Cuervo, one of the most iconic beverage brands when it comes to alcohol brands as well, and one of the stronger drinks you can have. I think it's really exciting to see that Jose Cuervo can come into sport. We haven't really seen a ton of tequila sponsorships in the sport. I mean, we seen Tequila Patron many, many years ago on the 37 car back in the 2000s, and we've seen some of those other brands before, but I haven't seen a ton of Jose Cuervo cars on the racetrack before, so maybe we'll see someone get a Jose Cuervo sponsorship at some point. I think that'd be cool. I think Noah Grace would be the one I would be interested to see if he got the Jose Cuervo sponsorship, or someone like maybe instead of like Ross getting sometimes Busch, maybe we see someone else get that. Who knows at this point? Nonetheless, big deal to see Jose Cuervo officially become the tequila sponsor for the sport. Really exciting, great stuff for that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the NASCAR Creator Series. Now, a couple of nights ago on Tuesday was the final night of the NASCAR Creator Series. And many people were competing for the overall win and overall event as Jaffa Vaninano was holding the final event with him and Golden Boy holding an announcement with that. I think maybe Roger Kirk might have been in the booth also, but I can't remember entirely. But it would end up being Tim the Tapman and Courage JD who would end up winning the NASCAR Creator Series for NASCAR 25. Massive deal for both of those guys to go out there and win the series. It seemed to me like they were the most interested from what I watched, especially from the first stream. They seemed to be the two that were the most invested and the most interested in really wanting to win this thing. And I think they both did a really good job from some of the clips that I've seen. And I think that, Tim the Tapman has been a NASCAR fan before. He's been in the Daytona 500 many, many years. And I know the Courage JD's also had some association with NASCAR in the past as well with some of the streaming stuff he's done. But I think both did a really solid job in their streaming side and really caring about the event and taking it seriously. So massive congratulations to both of them on winning the NASCAR Creator thing. I'm interested to see if they're going to show up for more events in the near and not so distant future and decide to do maybe some stuff with NASCAR 25 outside of this. Very interested about that. But nonetheless, really glad to see them both Tim the Tab and Encourage JD were able to win the first edition of the NASCAR Creator Series. Really awesome to see, and awesome to see they're going to be doing that, and they won the event for 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Daytona purses for this weekend. So every time you have a NASCAR Cup or Rally Auto Parts Series and NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, Bob Pockets usually puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Daytona 500, the purse is $31,045,575, the largest purse we have ever seen for the Daytona 500 in NASCAR history. For the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, it'll be worth $3,782,120, one of the largest purses we've seen for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, it's $1,276,300, which will end up likely being the most money the Truck Series will get in the event in 2026, which is why there's a lot of trucks showing up to this event this year. Massive deal, of course, for the 500, had the largest purse they've ever had in the history of their side. I think that's great to see. And I think for the O'Reilly and trucks, it's good to see an increase. I wish that was how much they were making every single week, because I think the Truck and O'Reilly series really needs to get more money in the sport over there. But nonetheless, I'm really happy to see the 500 basically has the Daytona purse, and good to see it finally came out. I think that's a solid purse money for the Daytona 500 this year, and I think it's great to see that we have a record for the purse. I think that's really awesome and great to see, and excited to see that there's a lot of money coming in for the 500 weekend this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Daytona 500. It was finally announced yesterday that the 2026 Daytona 500 has officially sold out with grandstand tickets, and the event is now sold out for 2026. I don't know what year in a row this is a sellout for the 500, but I believe it's like maybe the 10th or 11th year in a row the Daytona 500 has sold out. And I think that is really huge for the Daytona 500 that continues to happen now. And unfortunately took a lot longer for the 500 sellout this year than prior years. And that does make me a little bit nervous and concerned, because it took a long time for them to get the 500 sold out. I think the big thing is, hopefully down the road we can continue to grow the sport so we can have a little bit more sellouts a little bit quicker, especially for the 500. But we've seen a lot more of these races selling out in the last 2 years, and NASCAR has been growing, at least going in for people going to the race and attending the events. I just wish we could see an increase in other areas so that we could see more people show up down the road for some of these events. Nonetheless, glad to see the 500 sold out finally. It took a lot longer than it really needed to take, but I'm very happy to see the Daytona 500 is officially sold out once again. Hopefully people that attend can see a good race. It's probably going to be a lot of the fuel-saving side of things that we've seen a lot, but I do think it's good the 500 did officially sell out for 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about High Limit Racing. As it was officially announced yesterday early morning, the High Limit Racing has officially a new title sponsor in 2026. And instead of being called the Kubota High Limit Series going into the year, the series is going to be called the Interstate Batteries High Limit Series. Interstate Batteries, which has had association with motorsports for many, many years. Of course, they sponsor Busch, Ty Gibbs in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series, and Cup Series, I should say. And of course, they do sponsor some drivers sometimes in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, but they've, of course, been a fixture with Joe Gibbs Racing for many, many years. They sponsor Bobby Labonte, Dale Jarrett, J.J. Yeley, and Kyle Busch, and now Ty Gibbs up to this point. Sometimes do sponsor others like Christopher Bell, Chase Briscoe. Maybe we'll see him get a sponsorship this year, and even Denny Hamlin from time to time as well. But I think it's great to see Interstate Batteries expanding their horizons and working with the High Limit Series. High Limit is continuing to grow as a series at this point. They've got some big things and big ambitions they're working toward for the 2026 year. Obviously, we're going to see Brad Sweet also make a few starts. I believe who owns the series will be in that series for a few events throughout the year. I think it's great to see that they finally got a title sponsor for the event. I think they've got a shot at continuing to grow the series. You're going to have more races on Fox and FS1, which I think is actually really, really exciting stuff. So big deal on that front, and I think it's really going to be interesting to see exactly what happens there. But I think it's great to see Interstate Batteries will become the title sponsor, and I think they'll have some good sponsorship, and I think they'll be able to grow it going forward into the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Actions Detrimental. Now, we have not seen an Actions Detrimental episode to kick off the 2026 year. Well, many people have been wondering, would it be coming back in 2026? Now, yesterday during the media day when Denny Hamlin was sitting down with Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi, or co-hosts of the Teardown, Denny Hamlin did officially confirm that Actions Detrimental will actually be coming back in 2026, and the plan is to record either Monday or Tuesday when the Daytona 500 is officially concluded, whether that happens on Sunday or Monday. They will have the Actions Detrimental episode out either the Monday or Tuesday after Daytona 500 concludes. I'm very happy to see Actions Detrimental will be back this year. It's been a while since basically we've had an Actions Detrimental episode. Basically, a lot of people have been wondering if it was going to come back because Denny Hamlin did not have one after the cookout clash at Bowman Gray. And Denny Hamlin basically says he doesn't count that race because it's not a points pain event. He doesn't count that race toward being a reason to do an episode, albeit he probably would have had a lot of things to say considering how crazy the cookout clash was and how much some of the controversies would officiate and some of the unethical racing we saw on the racetrack at the clash last week or so. But I'm very happy to see that Actions Detrimental will be back for 2026. I think it's great to see they finally confirm that. I wanted to see the series return once again, so happy for that. And I think it's great to see that Actions Detrimental will be back, so I think it's a great show. It's a fun podcast to listen to. Denny and his co-host, Jared, do an amazing job, and I think that will be once again a great show in 2026. Looking forward to the show once again returning in the 2026 year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, we talked about this on the channel last night, but of course, Kyle Busch has won his first ever Daytona 500 pole. One of the big stories coming out of this is Junior Motorsports once again making the Daytona 500 in 2026 and making their second consecutive Daytona 500. Last year, Junior Motorsports had to race their way in on Thursday and actually had a really strong Daytona 500, showed some really good pace and speed with Justin Allgaier, and they were able to go out there and finish inside the top 10. They don't have to worry about racing in tonight during the duels because they now will have an opportunity and shot to win the Daytona 500 as they made their second run, and they will have a shot. I'm really happy to see Junior Motorsports making it on speed. They almost actually made the top 10, which is really, really impressive. They were not even the fastest open car. The fastest open car was Corey Hyde, who qualified inside the top 5 for the Daytona 500 Sunday, which I think is really, really impressive, though we'll see what happens after tonight, after the duels, see where everyone is truly going to be starting. But I think it's really awesome to see Junior Motorsports make the Daytona 500 this year. I think JRM will have a really good chance and opportunity to get up there and contend. Dale Jr. and Kelly don't have to be stressed about making the 500 this year. We'll see who else ends up making it. My prediction is that it'll probably be Corey LaJoie and Anthony Alfredo because Chandler Smith and LaJoie are both in the same duel. I expect LaJoie to have the best car out there going into the duel number 1. I have Anthony Alfredo making the second one at this point. But again, happy to see that Junior Motorsports will have a shot and opportunity to win the Daytona 500 as they look to win their first points paint event and only their second Cup start, which I think that would be impressive if they end up doing that in 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Natalie Decker. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Natalie Decker will make a few starts in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series in 2026. She will drive the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports in 2 NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series races in 2026. Those 2 races will be this weekend at Daytona International Speedway on Saturday, and her other start will take place at Pocono later this year from June going into July. Natalie Decker's obviously been rumored to be making a few starts. There's been a couple organizations that she has been associated with that she potentially could drive for. There was talk maybe she could end up driving for MBM Motorsports in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series, but then it was basically confirmed about a week or so back that likely she was going to end up driving for Joey Gase Motorsports in the 2026 season, but then of course we weren't really sure. She'll have, I think, a different, interesting sponsor coming in to work with her for a few races in 2026. And my question is, how many races will Natalie Decker end up running in 2026? Are these going to be the only 2 races that she ends up running this year? Or is she going to run more events? Because we know that Joey Gase, the owner of the team, is going to be running a few races in that number 35. Matt DiBenedetto did actually test with the SEMA program, I believe, at Rockham not too long ago. And I think there's some other drivers who could, in fact, end up getting behind the wheel, who could have a chance and opportunity to race in the 35, like an Austin J. Hill. who has been linked over to be driving for that team and program in 2026, most likely in all the road course races this year in season. So for Natalie, it's a really good opportunity to join a team, albeit it is a slower organization. They're not one of the fastest teams and fastest organizations, but I do think Natalie will have some potential decent speed. We'll see what she can do, and we'll see if she can perform in this event. She led laps up a couple years ago at Daytona during green flag pit stops, so we'll see what she can do as she looks running really well and shows some good speed with Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. As it was announced yesterday, the Kaulig Racing has announced some leadership updates for the 2026 NASCAR Cup and the Craftsman Truck Series year. So Lenny Chandler, who has been with the team and program for a couple of years, he is now the Vice President of Car and Truck Build Operations at the team going into 2026. While Justin Cox, who's been with the team and program for a little bit as well, he is now the Vice President of Operations at Kaulig Racing. I don't know insanely much about these two guys, but congratulations to both of them on getting the chance and opportunity to get improved with Kaulig. I'm hoping with the moves like this, we can see improvement from the Kaulig Racing team and organization. One of the things we've seen from Kaulig Racing is there's definitely been some pretty big struggles from the team and organization with some of their performances in the NASCAR Cup Series. But I do think the truck program will probably have some good pace and speed, because I do think that we're going to see some good things from them when it comes to their performance, and hopefully that we can see that from Kaulig, because there's been some question on how this team is truly going to perform this year. Are they going to be a championship caliber team in trucks? I think that's a big question right now. Is their Cup program going to get stronger? Because that's another big thing you have to look at, is will that Cup program get a lot better going into 2026? We'll just have to wait and see at this point. But nonetheless, I'm really happy to see that Kaulig Racing gets maybe some new changes. We'll see if they perform well, and we'll see if this team can get better. There has been some performance struggles in some ways with the team, and we'll see if they do, in fact, end up getting better this year and showing more pace and speed in NASCAR in the 2026 year on the Cup side, and also some of the lower series at this point as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tricon Garage. As it was announced on Tuesday going into Wednesday, that Tricon Garage has officially announced their crew chief / competition lineup for the 2026 NASCAR Truck Series season. And they did confirm they're going to have 5 full-time trucks in 2026. The one truck that'll be driven by Taylor Gray in the Truck Series this weekend, and Jimmy Johnson and Dario Franchitti. Jeremy Donnelly is going to be the crew chief on that truck. For the number 5 truck, they'll be driven by Nick Lights and other drivers throughout the year. Seth Smith is going to be the crew chief. For the number 11 truck, Scott Zipadelli, who we'll talk about here in just a short little bit, he'll be, of course, the crew chief for Caden Honeycutt. For the number 15 truck, there's been some changes at that truck, I believe, for 2026, as Jess Henley moves away from the number 17 truck and will crew chief for Tanner Gray in the Truck Series this year. And for the number 17 truck, that'll be driven by Gio Ruggiero. He will have Jeff Stankiewicz, a former crew chief of Grant Enfinger and other drivers like Sheldon Creed. He'll be the crew chief for Gio Ruggiero this year. And finally, Matt Pusha is once again the competition director for the team and program going into 2026. The pairing I'm very interested in is Jeff Stankiewicz and the 17 truck of Gio Ruggiero, because Jeff Stankiewicz has a lot of experience. He was a crew chief actually earlier last year for Grant Enfinger. And then it was announced before the end of the year he'd be joining up with the Tricon Garage team. And I think you got to go like Jeff Stankiewicz, who's won races in the Craftsman Truck Series, who's won races in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, I believe. You have a guy who has a lot of experience and knows how to basically do things and wrench. And I think working with having a veteran crew chief work with a young driver like Gio, who I think is going to have a really good chance and opportunity to win this weekend or tomorrow at Daytona, I think that's something I'm very excited about, because having a guy who's a little bit older on the crew chiefing side working with a young driver who I think's got a lot of potential, I think that's great to see. So I'm really excited to see how they all end up doing this year, but I'm also happy we finally got the competition lineup. They announced the lineup a little bit earlier last year, so surprised to see it took so long for them to finally get that lineup confirmed, but I'm glad to see they finally got it done nonetheless, and I think it's big to see that they've got everything kind of figured out at this this point on that for 2026. We'll see how things go, and we'll see how things go for the competition lineup going into the year. See if Tricon can be a factor this year. Maybe for the Truck Championship, they're probably going to be a factor this year with Caden Honeycutt. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if the Tricon team can be really strong and really quick in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this year as they look to win their second straight championship and get it done with another driver outside of Corey Heim in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chevrolet and Honda. As it was reported by Marshall Pruitt yesterday and then reported by Adam Stern a couple days ago as well, that it looks like Chevrolet and Honda are not going anywhere from IndyCar anytime soon. As it was reported by Adam Stern that Chevrolet and Honda are expected to continue as engine suppliers in IndyCar beyond the 2026 IndyCar season. They're also expected, according to a report from Marshall Pruitt, that it sounds like both manufacturers, as we talked about not too long ago, both manufacturers will be able to actually get an extra charter they can use in the near and not so distant future. We might be able to get an expanded IndyCar field going into the future as well. Obviously, this has been a really big question on the IndyCar side of things on what was going to happen with Chevrolet and Honda. There's been a lot of talk that Honda could come over to NASCAR around 2027 or 2028, but with it being expected that both Chevy and Honda are going to continue being IndyCar for the long-term and foreseeable future, that could put plans on hold for Honda to come over to NASCAR because there's been talk of a fifth manufacturer coming into NASCAR, and Honda's been that rumor manufacturer that might end up coming in, but I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen there in the future. If Honda could still do because they do have a big budget and they could go and run a lot of different manufacturers if they need to, or if they wanted to bring the Acura brand in, they certainly can end up doing that because Honda and Acura do have a big association. But for IndyCar, it's a big deal because had they lost both Chevrolet and Honda, that could have been a huge deal. Now, obviously, they're still searching for a third manufacturer for the future. There was talk not too long ago about Toyota going over to IndyCar. There's been talk about other manufacturers that could be interested. I remember at one point Ferrari was linked to go to IndyCar back in like 2019 or 2020. That obviously did not end up happening because they wanted their own engine supplier. They were not able to do that with the new situation for the next couple of years. But I think if you are an IndyCar fan, you should be really happy with this news to see this because it was very much unknown what was going to happen if they were actually going to be back in 2027 because there were big questions around whether they were going to come back. And I think it's good to see. It sounds like they are not going anywhere anytime soon. You don't want to see any manufacturers leave. You want to see these manufacturers continue being around. So I'm glad to see this finally is officially confirmed. They're not going anywhere anytime soon because obviously had they lost both Chevrolet and Honda, I think IndyCar would have been in trouble. Ed would have said a few years ago they both were going to leave. But I think IndyCar has been having a little bit of a resurgence recently. They've been making some decent changes. They're making some big moves. They've got that IndyCar race happening in Washington, D.C., which I think is a pretty big deal, albeit not sure if it's going to end up happening because there might be some issues with people going to it, among other things. But I'm glad to see that they won't be going anywhere. I think it's a good move for sure to see them back once again. And I think it's great to see they'll continue that partnership once again in 2027. And it sounds like for many years to come down the road and into the future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox Sports. Now, yesterday, Fox Sports finally debuted their new graphics package for their NASCAR coverage in 2026. Now, here's what I'll say about the new graphics package for Fox. I got some criticisms of Fox to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I do want to praise Fox for one thing. Number one, the cartoon characters are no more going into 2026. I said that last week or about a week or so ago when we had the Clash of Daytona last Wednesday. The cartoon characters are no more going into the year. I think that is a really good change, getting rid of the cartoon characters. A lot of people like myself have been very much against the cartoon characters being on the coverage, so I think that is a major step in the right direction. The other thing I have to say, I think the ticker on the side is a lot better in the presentation, at least from the ticker side of things. It's a lot cleaner too. I was not the biggest fan of the old school ticker they had, but the new style ticker they have is a little clean. I will say one criticism of the ticker, I think it's a little bit too bulky, to be honest. I think they could cut it down and trim down some of the telemetry stuff that they have and fix some of the issues right there. But outside of that, I do think Fox's ticker is still very good. And I think some of the presentation side of things, it's a major step in the right direction. And it seems like Fox is listening at least a little bit. But there are still issues with Fox. I want to give a shout out to Danny B Talks on Twitter. He posted this, and a lot of other people also posted this as well. But the manufacturers, they're all over the place. You've got Chase Elliott. We don't even know what manufacturer he is from qualifying. You got Larson, who I think is running like a Ford or something. You've got Kyle Busch in a Richard Childress Racing Toyota. You have Joe Logano in a Penske Chevrolet. I know Penske does IndyCar, but they don't do it's Chevrolet and IndyCar, but they don't do Chevrolet right now, though. Down the road, maybe they do. You got other like Bowman in like a Toyota or like a Ford or something like that. So you got Hendrick and a bunch of different manufacturers. You got Hyman like a Chevrolet, I think. It's just completely all over the place, and the graphics group, they know better than this. They should this is something that is instant details and pay attention to detail, and it seems like I've talked about this before. While Fox might make a good change, and I praised them yesterday, they still have a lot of work to do to get back in the good graces of people, and they have a lot of work they need to do in order to get things fixed going forward into the future. So while I'll praise Fox for some things and give them credit when they deserve credit, they certainly do not deserve credit for this mishap and this mistake. I think they screwed this up without question. Made a big mistake right there. I think the graphics package, though, is an improvement and a step up and a step in the right direction, but I think it certainly could be better. I think that there's things about it that are improved, but I think there's things that certainly could be better about the graphics card and some of the graphics packages we're seeing in NASCAR currently at this moment. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Scott Zipadelli. As it was reported yesterday and announced that Scott Zipadelli will not travel to Daytona this weekend due to an injury I believe he suffered during the offseason. David Stewart, one of the lead engineers of the number 11 truck that Caden Honeycutt is going to drive this year, he will be the crew chief for Caden Honeycutt this weekend at Daytona. Now, it's unknown how long we're not going to see Scott Zipadelli out at the racetrack. It's unknown if this is just a one-race deal or if there'll be many other races we will not see Scott Zipadelli out of the racetrack as he continues to recover from the injury. We don't know exactly what the injury is. We're not sure what it is. But depending on what it is, it makes a lot of sense to sit at home and sit there. And even though that David Stewart is going to be really calling the shots, it'll probably be Scott Zipadelli who will be really calling the shots. So it's not the biggest thing I'm worried about at this point. And if you're going to have a race you're going to miss, it is Daytona. Yes, I know that technically the 11 truck won last year at Daytona with Corey Hyman crossed the finish line first, but they won after Park Kligerman did end up getting disqualified. But if you're going to miss races early in the year, it's not bad to miss Daytona or Atlanta, especially if you're a crew chief, because number one, crew chiefing side of things doesn't matter the most for trucks, unlike the Cup Series where it's really difficult to pass. You can pass in the Truck Series and move forward, though you can have some gridlock in the Truck Series as well. But I think it's going to be a big year for this 11 team, and many people do expect the 11 truck will have a lot of speed this year, even though Corey Hyman is no longer with the team anymore on a full-time basis, though he'll be there part-time and helping the team throughout the year try to grow that program. I think, though, it's a big loss, at least for this weekend at Daytona, but I wasn't really expecting Caden to be a major factor for the win anyways. He's not one of the guys I have going for victory this weekend. We'll talk about one of those guys who I think has a really good shot here in just a short little bit. Big news, though, to see Scott Zipadelli not at the track. He's been in so many Truck Series races at this point, has had a lot of success, and I think it's big to see that he's not there this weekend, but it's not the biggest loss, at least for this weekend. It's a big loss in a sense, but it's not the biggest loss considering it is a super speedway, and I think on that front, they'll still probably be okay, all things considered. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Casey Mears. Now, during Media Day yesterday, Casey Mears talked about a lot of things, including Greg Biffle. But one big question he did get asked was about his plans for 2026 in regards to racing. Now, Casey Mears, of course, will have to later tonight attempt to qualify to make the Daytona 500 this year. Obviously, his 66 car was the slowest car on the racetrack during practice, and it seemed like he had the slowest car in qualifying trim as well. Him and J.G. Ely seemed to be the two cars that were struggling the most, but he might be able to be good in the draft. Well, it sounds like Casey Mears is planning to run more NASCAR races in 2026 instead of just running the Daytona 500. It's already been reported about a few weeks back, remember correctly, that if they do not make the Daytona 500 later tonight, they will be running at Atlanta next week, and they'll have the same sponsorship as well. My other big question is, because Casey is trying to reach, I believe, 500 career starts in the NASCAR Cup Series, what other races will he run in the Cup Series this year? Could he run at Martinsville? He ran at Martinsville last year in that 66 car. I think he ran in both Martinsville races, as a matter of fact. It did look pretty solid out there, all things considered. He did run at Talladega at the end of the year, I'm pretty sure. He also ran some other big races early in the year. And I think he could end up going, if he runs a lot of races, he can end up reaching over 500 Cup starts. And my question is this the only series he is going to end up running in 2026? Or is he going to run in more series throughout the 2026 year? I think that is another big question to kind of wonder about at this point when it comes to Casey Mears, because I'm glad to see he's continuing to race and loves and has a passion for this sport. And I think Casey's someone who will have a shot and opportunity to contend if the car is going to be a little quicker, because I don't think the Garage 6 car is certainly the fastest car out on the racetrack currently at the moment right now. So we'll see what happens there, and we'll see if there can be some good things that can come from this, and we'll see how many races Casey ends up running in the 2026 year. He's out the only one that kind of talked about their plans. It sounds like Live Fast is going to run a lot of the super speedways. I know BJ kind of talked about this yesterday during media days, but he did say he's also planning to run a non-drafting track, it sounds like, maybe like a downforce track like Charlotte potentially, like doing the Coke 600, having other drivers behind the wheel. There's talk that Catherine Lake could race the 78 car at some point this year. So I think that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Nonetheless, glad to see it sounds like Casey will be running more races in 2026. We'll see if he can perform really well and show great things in NASCAR in the 2026 year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, there's been a lot of talk, of course, about the new chase format in 2026. And one driver people have been criticizing for this is Shane Van Gisbergen, or talk about someone who will not make the chase this year is Shane Van Gisbergen. But Shane Van Gisbergen would disagree with you on that front. He spoke on the new format and actually praised the new format quite a bit. He says the new format is a more pure format when it comes to championships, and he said his goal and aims to make the chase. He says he did not just come to NASCAR to win on road courses. He came to NASCAR to also win on ovals. You look at Shane Van Gisbergen, even go back to last week for that matter, he has gotten way better on ovals. You look at his average finish in the second half of the year, he had like an average finish on ovals of like 30 or 31st the first half of the season. That average finish improved drastically to like 22nd or 21st. And if not for races like New Hampshire where he was up front and unfortunately got crashed out of that race, and then you think about some of the other races where he ran well, like Las Vegas, for example, where he had one of the faster cars in the field, ran top 10 most of the day. He got better in the second half of the year, and I look at, and he got a good run, finish at Talladega, he finished in the top 15 at Martinsville, a top 15 run at Richmond, got a top 10 at Kansas. I think people saying that Shane Van Gisbergen isn't going to make the chase this year, well, maybe he doesn't make the chase. I think he will end up making it. I think it's very likely that that car will have the pace and speed to be a major factor and contender this upcoming season, and that's the goal for Shane, being the top 16 in points by the end of the regular season. And just saying, wins matter a lot more because you get 20 extra points now or something like that compared to second place. And if you get stage points, you could end up having a lot more points coming in for you. So I think while people are dissing Shane, and people can do what they want, I think it's not really fair to Shane, because I do think Shane will actually be a major factor and contender to make the chase this year. I think the goal again for him is to make the chase. I think he's got a really strong chance and a really great opportunity to make the chase this year, and I think he will have a very good chance to get it done. I do think the pace will be there for that car, and I think he'll have a great opportunity and certainly a really good shot at getting it done. I think he will have a very fast opportunity here, show some great things. I think he will be a big factor and certainly a pretty big contender to make the chase this year. And there's some guys that I think he'll run better, more consistent. Like he'll probably run better, more consistent than the host of our will. So I think nonetheless it's big to see that he'll be back once again in this series. And I think again he's got a really good chance and opportunity to certainly make the chase in the 2026 NASCAR season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin spoke on quite a few things yesterday during his media availability. One of the big things he talked about is the injury that he had suffered throughout the offseason. Denny Hamlin, of course, had shoulder surgery back, I think, at the end of 2024. And he talked about a fact that he unfortunately re-injured that shoulder, basically going through the rubble that happened from the unfortunate fire that happened in December. He fell down, going through the rubble, and basically re-injured that. And he says he can't really lift his hand at this point, and he's still recovering from that currently at the moment. Hamlin says he'll be probably all right at this point. He is not planning to have his shoulder surgery until after the season concludes. Keep in mind, we're only on race number 1 of 2026. It's the middle of February right now. That November, remind you, is 9 months from now. So that's a long way to go. And the season's actually a little longer this year than it was last year, because it's almost going to be the middle of November when the season is going to end up coming to a close. Now, you also talk about another thing is how the sport can grow. He says that someone needs to come in and spend a lot of money to really help grow the sport long term. And he talked about a company known as Liberty Media, who of course does have a lot of money. Now, personally, I don't want to see Liberty Media really running the sport. Now, bringing an infusion of cash in the sport, I think that would be a really big thing. But Liberty Media has really hurt Formula One's in some of their things they've made. I mean, look at the move to Apple, for example. I don't want to see NASCAR races go on Apple because I think most people will be able to tune in at this point. But I do agree that the series, they need a lot of money. I think one of the biggest issues with NASCAR, one of the things that's a big problem, is the cash. There's not enough cash coming into the sport currently at the moment right now. As we discovered from the lawsuit, a lot of teams are not making a lot of money, but even NASCAR, they're not making a massive amount of money at the top of the dollar. And they're having issues with money. I mean, the recent deal, they got $7.7 billion for 7 years, but they're only getting $1.1 billion annually from the media rights deal across the board. So I think NASCAR just has a major money issue that really needs to be looked at this point. Having a company come in and spend some extra money, and I think getting more advertisers in the sport. And the other big thing is the advertising. Denny actually is really happy about NASCAR actually making some of the promotional moves they're making, which I think that's a great thing they're doing at this point. I think that we need more money coming into the sport to really help grow, and I really hope that can happen in the future so NASCAR can get in the best position to grow long term in the foreseeable future. So we'll see what happens there. But Hamlin kind of talked about some interesting things there. Again, I agree with Hamlin that we need to see a little bit more money come into the sport. I think we need to see double what we're seeing for teams to really be happy at this point, though they got permanent charges, which is a great thing. So in a sense, so I think Denny talked about that, and hopefully he can recover soon from that injury. But good to see Denny Hamlin discuss some of the things and talk about it, as Hamlin will continue to try to improve and get better for the start of the 2026 NASCAR season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, Brad Keselowski spoke to the media yesterday during media days after getting back in the car once again at Daytona, and the first time since he had the injury in the offseason. Brad Keselowski unfortunately broke his femur in his leg after stepping out of the car, and basically his car when he's getting ready to do skiing, and he said that is about the worst injury that he's had in his NASCAR career. He spoke about being back in the car once again. He says that he knows for sure that he is injured, knows he has an injury. He's not unaware that he has an injury. He's very much aware that he currently has an injury at this point. And he basically says he feels fine when he's driving. He actually says the most healing thing is actually driving the race car, because he actually feels all right driving the race car at this point. Now, of course, a big question is, who are the drivers on standby for Brad Keselowski throughout 2026? Well, for this weekend at the Daytona 500, veteran David Ragan is on standby for the Daytona 500 this year. David Ragan, of course, is a pretty solid super speedway guy. Could end up getting in place of Brad, and there's definitely talk that Brad could get out of the car during the Daytona 500 this year, and David Ragan would end up being the driver coming in. Now, for other races outside of the Daytona 500, Corey LaJoie, if he doesn't run the 99 car for other races this year, he will be the standby driver for Brad Keselowski at like Atlanta, Phoenix, many of those are tracks early in the year. But for the road course races this year, Joey Hant, a road course specialist and the RFK reserve driver basically for 2026 on the road courses, Joey Hant will be on standby for Brad Keselowski if we have to use him at Circuit of the Americas. So Brad's got some really good drivers that can be on standby for him for 2026, just in case Brad Keselowski does need to get out of the car at some point. Again, seeing him walking with the cane, which I think it's funny, they've got sponsorship like Castrol and Kroger, some other companies that are actually sponsoring that cane. I found that to be really hilarious and really funny. But I think for Brad, the most important thing is continuing to heal and get better at this point. But getting in the car, I'm glad, because Brad actually shows some decent speed, and maybe Brad will get a Daytona 500 win. I think that is certainly a possibility. I think Brad will probably have a chance and opportunity to certainly have a really fast car. But I think it's good to see Brad back in the car. Again, I'm not sure if Brad is going to be the most super competitive out there when we get to Daytona. Well, which we are at Daytona, obviously. But I think for Brad, it's good to see him back in the car once again. Hopefully he can recover soon. And not recover, but hopefully he can run well. They have a standby guy just in case. We'll see if that ends up being strong. And we'll see if Brad can be competitive in the 500 here in a couple days, as he, of course, is already locked in the 500 because he has a charter. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart spoke to Bob Pockrass a couple days ago about being back in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. He has said he is really excited to be back in a Kaulig truck once again in the 2026 year, back to be racing in NASCAR again. He also talked about the potential fact he could run another NASCAR race in trucks in 2026. He says, never say never of getting behind the wheel of a truck after the race at Daytona. He has stated publicly that it depends on how he runs at Daytona. If he feels excited about being back, he might be interested in wanting to run another race once again. Now, as for Tony, it's really exciting to see him back in trucks. It has been a very long time since Tony Stewart has competed in NASCAR. It's been a decade since the last time he raced in the sport. He was supposed to do a one-off in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series in 2020, I believe, driving a second Stewart-Haas racing car at the time. And I believe it was going to be the 00 he was going to end up driving. But, of course, because fans were not allowed at the time, and COVID happened, basically Tony, because fans couldn't be there, Tony Stewart decided to back away from doing that and did not end up doing that event at Indianapolis Road Course. But as for Tony Stewart, it is a really huge deal to see him back in trucks. Now, the side of things that gets me excited for Tony is, I know there's a lot of people saying, oh, it's bold to pick Tony to win, but I think Tony Stewart realistically could actually go out there and win this weekend, because while the Kaulig and Rand team may not be like the quickest team at points, I think having the experience of someone like Tony Stewart, who has won, mind you, a lot of races at Daytona, not just in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series, where he's won 6 or 7 races at the track. Not only in fact, he's also won multiple Busch clashes at the track in 2001, 2002, and 2007. He really won the race in 2012. But also, in fact, Tony does have a lot of experience by winning at Daytona in the summer race as well. I think having that experience is going to be a huge deal, especially for the Kaulig team, because you're going to have the strength in numbers. And people say, what if Tony fails to qualify? The good news is for Tony is, one, the 25 truck does have decent owner's points going in the event, especially if rain comes into play tomorrow. But number two, the other thing is the fact that you have a lot of really strong teams, and they're going to have that provisional that's going to get them in the race, which I think is a big benefactor for a guy like Tony Stewart. And I certainly do think that Tony, like I said, has a great chance and opportunity to make the race, and he's my pick to win the race currently at the moment, though there's a lot of big names in the field. You've got Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who I think is going to have a really good chance. You're going to have Michael McDowell, Carson Hocevar, and you're going to have other big names racing in this race, like John Remachek, Corey LaJoie, Cletus Farrell's in the Truck Series race, and there's a lot of big names in this event this year. Again, the other side of thing, I hope Tony gets to make another start in trucks. It seems like he's very interested, but I think it's great to see Tony back racing once again, because it's been such a long time since he raced in NASCAR. You talk about there's some things that do need to happen for the sport to grow as well, something similar that Denny Hamlin kind of talked about, but I'm very happy to see once again that Tony Stewart is racing in the sport. I think Tony will be certainly fast and certainly have a chance and opportunity to win at Daytona. We'll see if he can bring that pace and speed out when we get to Daytona here tomorrow, and we'll see if he can qualify very well here very soon at Daytona, which of course qualifying will take place tomorrow for the truck race. Glad to see Tony back in the sport once again. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about NASCAR. Now, yesterday on NASCAR's YouTube, Twitter page, and other pages as well, NASCAR, it seems like, is teasing a really big announcement that will likely be coming sometime today or in the next couple days as well. Now, what could this announcement be? Well, there has been, of course, a lot of speculation on what this could end up being. There's a couple different schools of thought. Some of the thoughts is that this could be a new Dodge potentially coming into Cup for 2027. Tim Kuniskis has said publicly they do want to have Dodge, and they do want to have a Dodge on the grid for the Daytona 500 in 2027. So could this be the Dodge Charger? I will say, looking at some photos of the newer Dodge Chargers are going to be coming back in the near future. I think it definitely could certainly be a possibility, but I'm not thinking that this is what it's going to be. I think what it's going to be is this EV thing that's been going around for a while that NASCAR's been teasing. Obviously, NASCAR's been teasing this EV project for a very long time. We have seen some of the prototypes out there. They did some of the testing with some of the cars, and you actually can take a look at the car a little bit. There's some to talk about. There's a wing on the back of the car, which is something that we have seen, of course, from the cars we've seen for some of the prototypes. It does have the look of that at this point. And I think the theory is that that's the school of thought is where NASCAR is going. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people that are not big fans of the EV car. I'm not the biggest fan of the EV car either myself. But NASCAR, what they're trying to do is, especially for the future when it comes to the car manufacturer side of things, is they're trying to prepare in advance just in case if they're going to have to go that direction. With the current administration in the country, I'm not sure if they're ever going to go toward that electric grid. But what if things change? Because the thing with the car industry is it's very unstable at this point right now, and it's very unknown what's going to happen with the car industry long term. But to me, what this looks like, again, is I think this is most likely an EV car. It would be great, though, if it's a Dodge Charger, but I don't think it would make the most sense for basically, especially with there not being a ton of fanfare toward 27 in a sense. It would be crazy to already announce that the Dodge Charger is going to come in very, very quickly for 27. Had to certainly be a quick turnaround, but let's say if it is the Dodge Charger, who could be some teams that go over there? Well, you're obviously going to have Kaulig Racing no matter what for 2027, considering they're not having any Chevrolet support going into 2026. You could get some other teams that could go over. I think about Rick Ware Racing as a team to watch. I know RFK Racing, a team that people talk about. I think that's a team that certainly could be one to watch out for that could make a move over there like that in the near future as well. And I think there's some other teams that could be sleepers like Legacy, but it sounds like they might be getting some support from JGR, it sounds like, for 2026. So not sure what's going on over there currently at the moment. But I think it's big. They're teasing a pretty big announcement. They're teasing something big. Again, most likely what it is, there's an EV announcement scheduled from Chevrolet, it sounds like, in Daytona. So I think that's what it's going to be, a Chevrolet EV car that might run an EV series. People tease a Tesla Cybertruck, which who knows, it could be something like that. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what it ends up being. I know people aren't the biggest fan of the thing regardless, but it looks like they're teasing something really huge and really big for the future. We'll see what ends up happening with that, and we'll see what it ends up being that goes out there and what the announcement is. We might talk about it on the channel, maybe not at this point, who knows. We'll see what it ends up being because we might do a video on that if it ends up being the new Dodge Charger or a new Dodge that might come to NASCAR for 2027. And now we're going to head jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're doing a little bit of a silly season catch-up. As there are many drivers currently at the moment that are not signed for the 2027 year. And there's a lot of big name drivers do have some big questions going into 2027 at this point. Among the notables are Kyle Busch, Alex Bowman, and Ryan Preece. Let's begin with Ryan Preece really quickly here. Ryan Preece is a driver that, in my opinion, has started the year off on a really strong note with RFK Racing, but he only has a contract currently at the moment through 2026. He's not the only RFK driver that's in a contract year. Chris Buescher and the owner, Brad Keselowski, are both in contract years also with their team and program. But one of the issues for RFK Racing is they do not have a third charter currently at the moment going into 2026. And if they're going to continue running three cars down the road, they're going to need a third charter. Now, potentially, with Dodge comes in 27, maybe you do find a way to get third charter. But it would make a lot of sense for Ryan Preece to stick around. My prediction is Ryan Preece more than likely will be back with RFK Racing in 2027. He's just been doing a really good job to start the year, and they'll probably try to find a way to get a charter maybe from a team like Hendrick Motorsports, for example, because that could lead to sendouts being one to watch out for there. But I certainly think that they'll be looking to try to find something for Preece, because Ryan Preece, in my opinion, should be in Cup full-time. He's proven it this year to start, and I think he should be sticking around for a long time into the future. The other two big names, those are Kyle Busch and Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman spoke to the media about this a little bit and said that he always seems like every year we're talking about Alex Bowman. He's a free agent, and he's not really worried right now about his future currently at the moment. Alex Bowman is the only Hendrick driver not signed past the 2026 season. We'll get to the other driver here that just signed recently in just a short little bit. But for Alex Bowman, when it comes to the contract side of things, there are things to look at with Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman does have some things going in his favor. Number one, this new championship format, I think, is actually going to benefit Alex Bowman a lot more. I think he will be a top 10 guy most of the year. Number 2, when you look at the history of fourth drivers, Alex Bowman, in my opinion, is the best fourth driver Hendrick has ever had. He's had 8 wins in the Cup Series, which no other fourth driver in the team can say they have more than like 2 or 3 at this point right now. And Bowman is a really steady guy, and he's got the Ally sponsorship through 2028, and Ally is a massive fan and really likes Alex Bowman. So I think that that's the thing that could really benefit Alex Bowman. I think more than likely Bowman ends up sticking around unless Tyler Reddick doesn't return to 2311. If you had to choose between Tyler Reddick and Bowman, I would right now go with Tyler Reddick. But then you can move Alex Bowman to Spire if you want to, if you don't keep Daniel Suarez. But I think that would be the big thing is Bowman, I think more than likely ends up staying with Hendrick unless Reddick becomes eventually a free agent. So I think that's how things are going to go there. And finally, the obvious one is Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch he has already had a big week, of course. He won the pole for the Daytona 500, which I think is a really huge deal for Kyle. But Kyle Busch knows that this is a performance-based business and knows he's going to have to perform really well if he wants to stay at Richard Childress Racing long-term or if he wants to see this team run really well. For Kyle Busch, I think it's a big if and when what's going to happen. If RCR can bring a lot of that same speed they just had for the 500 pole and do that all year, Kyle Busch, I think, could end up staying with Richard Childress Racing. But the big question is, let's say he doesn't return to his team. Where could Kyle Busch end up going for 2027? I think the most likely landing spot is Spire Motorsports. I think that's where he would end up going because he has a connection over there with Spire Motorsports currently at the moment right now. He's going to be driving 8 Truck Series races for them. The HendrickCars.com sponsorship is there. And he sold his own truck team to Spire for them to have multiple trucks. So I think that is most likely any spot for Kyle at this point because it sounds like the Spire is going big game hunting this year from what Jordan Bianchi has said, and they continue to mention Kyle Busch. I think he's not the only big name that's in the running for that 7 car currently at the moment. I think Stenhouse is in the running for that as well. There's some other big names that might be in the running. He could also be in the running for the 48, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen at this point for Kyle. But I think for Kyle Busch, that's going to be the big thing to watch for this year is for him the silly season. If he performs as bad as he did last year throughout the year, then I think he goes somewhere else because I don't think Kyle Busch is a problem. It's Rich Childress Racing that I think is currently the problem right now in this team. So I think for Kyle Busch, I think it's going to be big fun to see what happens with Busch, where he ends up going for 2027. My prediction, like I said, is that he ends up most likely in a Spire car next year, but we'll see if he does in fact end up over the Spire Motorsports team. That's my early prediction on where he ends up going right now, is I think he'll end up in a Spire Motorsports car in 2027. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. The first big silly season domino has fallen, and that, like I mentioned, is Kyle Larson. As it was officially announced late last night before qualifying happened for the Daytona 500, that Kyle Larson has signed a long-term contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports. They've also signed HendrickCars.com to a long-term extension as well as a sponsor, as Kyle Larson has signed an extension with Hendrick Motorsports through the remainder of the media deal, which goes through 2031. It was also announced as well that Cliff Daniels has signed a multi-year deal. Now, his deal does not go through 2031, it sounds like, but more than likely he will have a contract almost through the remainder of the media deal. Everyone was expecting more than likely Kyle Larson was going to sign a long-term extension with Hendrick Motorsports. This move makes way too much sense. Number one, he's coming off of winning his second but his second NASCAR Cup Series championship. His first one, of course, coming in 2021. Number two, under a full season format last year, which people are under the chase format and other formats as well, Larson won the championship. People talk about last year being a down year for Kyle Larson. He still had a 3-win season, scored a lot of top 5s and top 10s. It had like 7 or 8 top 10s in the final 10 races of the season, and nearly won a few races like Dega. If not for running out of gas, he might have won Dega. He almost beat Shane Van Gisbergen at his own game at the Charlotte Roval. People forget how good Larson was near the end of the year. And I look at Larson long term. He's a future, and he's a franchise guy at Hendrick Motorsports right now and is your leader of the team. He's the 3rd winningest driver in Hendrick Motorsports history, only behind Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon in the history of the team. So this move was without question a no-brainer from Hendrick Motorsports to keep him there long term. Now, could this be the final contract for Kyle Larson at Hendrick Motorsports. It absolutely could be the final contract for Larson. Larson has talked about in the past that he eventually wants to do some other forms of racing. He's talked about wanting to do the Indy 500 once again in the near future. He's talked about wanting to maybe do some NHRA stuff and do dirt racing and go do other forms of racing. But Larson also knows that he wants to continue racing in NASCAR for a long time. And you think about the contract, by the end of 2031, Larson will have raced in NASCAR Cup competition for nearly 2 decades. Larson's had a very long career, but he's also, like people mentioned, not the most conventional guy at this point. But I think for everyone at this team, like I've already said, yeah, this move's a no-brainer. It made too much sense. He's expected to be one of the favorites for the championship once again this season in particular. And I think Larson will have a very fast and really strong car. I mean, he qualified up front for the 500 this year. He'll have a chance to do really well in the duels later tonight. But I think Larson already showed he won the pole for the Clash, and he's probably going to get back to winning a lot of races this year because while Larson maybe not the best at saving tires at points, he certainly is a guy that knows how to manage things at times as well, seen it in dirt. And he's also someone that's probably going to win many races down the road for many years to come. If I had to make a prediction of how many wins he'll have by the end of this contract, by 2031, Larson, I think, will get to close to 60 career Cup Series wins because he averages 3 to 4 wins a year. Let's say races for 5 or 6 more years. He's got, 32 or 33 Cup wins. He gets 4 or 5 wins each year, gets, 5 wins for the next 5 or 6 years. He'll get almost a 60 or 70 career wins, and that's the long-term goal for Larson, win more championships. And I think it's very realistic to think that Kyle Larson, by the end of this contract, will have another championship or 2. I think it is definitely easier under this format to win a championship compared to the other format, and Larson's already got 2 championships under him. And I think it's a good chance Larson could get that 3rd championship maybe this year. He's trying to become the first driver since Jimmy Johnson won 5 in a row to do that. And he's also, of course, going to have more chance to win races, and I think he'll do that for a long time. With Larson being signed, him and Carson Oates right now are tied for the longest extensions because they both go to the end of the media rights deal. And he probably won't be the last driver signing a very long term extension in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if Reddick doesn't go to Spire. I wouldn't be surprised if Reddick also signs a long-term extension with this team and with this program to stick around. But for Kyle Larson, it's a huge deal to stay with Hendrick Motorsports through 2031. I talked about it yesterday. I think Larson's going to be in a really good position for many, many years to come, and I expect Kyle Larson to be a championship contender for the long term and the foreseeable future, and I think he's going to win a lot of racing cup competition. He's probably going to win early in the year. There's some good tracks coming up for Larson, but big to see Larson sticking around and not going anywhere anytime soon as he continues to look for wins and build a great career at Hendrick Motorsports for many, many years to come. So, that's for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so that when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How do you think Larson's going to do for the next half decade? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what do you think happens to Kyle Busch, Alex Bowman, and other drivers in some of these rides? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tonight on the channel, reactions to Daytona duels. I might just do one combined video on both of the duels. Then tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have React. We're going to have the paint skin video going out for the Daytona 500. Everyone basically gets officially confirmed on who's going to make it and who doesn't make it. And then, of course, we are going to have reactions maybe to truck qualifying potentially, depending on who wins the pole for that. And then, of course, we are going to have reactions to the Truck Series race. And then on Saturday, we'll have basically reactions to maybe qualifying for the O'Reilly race. And then, of course, we'll have reactions to some other stuff as well and do a review of the O'Reilly race at Daytona. Then, of course, on Sunday, we'll have the starting lineup video for the Daytona 500. And we'll have the race review as well for that. Got a lot of content coming up. People like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisbergen, Carl Roberts, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Crease, Sam Ayer, Frankie Muniz, Cletus Vaughn, Dodge, Ram, Brad Keselowski, Eric Almirola, Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Robbie Gordon, Red Bull, Connor Zills, Junior Motorsports, Daniel Suarez. You name that, all the good stuff we'll talk about on the channel in the coming days and weeks as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.